Welcome to the AFR Saints channel, where we provide you daily content on your favorite team, the New Orleans Saints. Do us a favor and hit that subscribe button. Be sure to leave your comments below and smash that like button. Who dat? Yesterday, we led the show with the news about Derek Carr signing with the New Orleans Saints. It took up a lot of the show, as you might expect. And we'll continue today getting through a lot of the reaction to the Derek Carr news and what it means for the Saints and what it means for what they might do in free agency, etc. And what we do know as this has advanced a bit is Derek Carr's contract details now. We didn't know it fully yesterday. What we knew is what had been reported, which was the 4-year, $150 million contract, which included some $100 million in guarantees. That, as I said yesterday, was not very appealing at all. And me saying right now that it's not very appealing at all is actually an understatement, because that was actually gross. The way Ian Rappaport shared the news when the contract news first broke was 4-year, $150 million with $100 million in total guarantees, $70 million effectively fully guaranteed, 60 at signing, $10 million in year 3 vesting after year 1. Anyway, that's a lot of money. Now we know how it's structured, which does give the Saints some wiggle room, and it's less grotesque than it was initially put forth. I'm not completely on board with it, but I'll get to that. Let's first go through the contract, and I don't want to bore you with numbers. I get it. This isn't contract, and contract talk isn't appealing to everyone. I get that. Like, salary cap talk isn't super appealing, but let me get through this so I can explain how it might affect the Saints after year 2 and beyond, okay? So in 2020, we know what they did, right? They gave him a giant signing bonus so they could spread that over 5 years and give him a lower cap number to make it structure to fit the Saints' cap issues. So in year 1, the Saints' cap hit for Derek Carr is $7.2 million. In year 2, so 2024, it jumps to $35 million with a dead cap number of $52.8 million. So you are guaranteed that you're going to have Derek Carr for at least 2 years, because there's no way the Saints would eat $52 million. Basically, if he's not on the roster in 2024, it would cost the Saints $52 million. $35 million if he's on the roster. So year 3, 2025, is where it kind of gets interesting. The cap number is $45.7 million. The dead cap number is $17.1, meaning if he's on the roster, he counts $45 million. If he's not on the roster, he counts $17 million. Ideally, you'd love for Derek Carr to be awesome and to warrant that number, or warrant an extension where you could give him an even longer-term deal. But if he stinks, you can get rid of him. It'll cost you $17 million, and then another $11 million in 2026, and then $5.7 million in 2027. So it steps down a little bit, and there's also an out after 2025. So after year 3, to where they could do a post-June 1 release and get some more cap relief. So really, you're super on the hook for 2 years, 2023, 2024. You got a big dead cap number. I mean, it's 8 figures. $17 million in 2025, $11 million in 2026, and then $5.7 million in 2027. So it's more palatable later in the deal if you part with him. And if he's great, then great. That's a great problem to have. Then you could sign him to an extension, restructure, all that stuff. So really, you're looking at the next 2 years where you're pot committed to Derek Carr, 2023 and 2024. And I know what the conversation has been. It's been, well, Kai Harley's a cap genius and he'll figure it out. And that's true. I mean, I've always said that. I'm the guy who sat here forever and said there's no such thing as cap hell, because you can always manipulate the cap to make it work. The Saints are proof of that. But just because you can do something doesn't mean you necessarily should do something. Like, can I leave the show today and go to a luxury car dealer and finance a $150,000 vehicle? Yeah, I can do that. Should I do that? Probably not. It's going to mean I'm going to have to maneuver a lot of other things in my life that probably aren't worth maneuvering to afford and pay for a car I really don't need. Carr, no pun intended. But I do love a good pun. My goodness, do I love a pun. I tell you what, mate. There it is. So I want to clarify again, because I am really, really not being contentious here. I know in this, in sports talk especially, so much of this medium is people yelling angrily at each other. Like, that's all Twitter is. It's like people yelling and calling other people stupid and why they're dumb and they're wrong. And I'm not doing that here. I really, really, really am not doing that here. There's a lot of times I do where y'all know this. I'll dig my heels in. I'm very staunch about how I feel about a certain thing, and I'll argue my points passionately. And I do feel strongly about this, but it's a thing where it really is just a matter of approach and risk tolerance. This isn't about I'm right, you're wrong, or anything like that. It's really just a matter of what you feel is the proper approach to building an organization. And there are different approaches to doing so. I was perfectly fine with the Saints being, I want to say reckless, but spending the way they did when Drew Brees was the quarterback. Because even until the very end, you always felt like with Drew Brees, you could win a Super Bowl. Get into the playoffs, you could win a Super Bowl. So if you needed to kick the can down the road, if you needed to rework deals to add what you felt might be the missing piece, get Brees that receiver, shore up the offensive line, bring in a middle linebacker, whatever it may be, you could do it, and it was justified because you were trying to win a championship. I don't believe the Saints can win a championship with Derek Carr. So you're in this weird zone, right, where your floor with Derek Carr is undeniably higher, but I believe the ceiling with Derek Carr is also lower. If you go draft a quarterback, your floor is absolutely lower. That's not even debatable. You could draft Zach Wilson, and you could bottom out. You could draft a quarterback, and your floor is undeniably lower than it is with Derek Carr. But your ceiling is potentially higher. You could draft the guy that's your quarterback for the next decade plus that leads you to a Super Bowl. That's the risk reward. That's the point I'm making. Some people are like, hey, let's just keep churning along with a guy like Carr, win games, win 8, 9, 10 games, make the playoffs, maybe you draft really good and eventually have the breakthrough. And that's one way to do it. That is one way to do it. But the Saints did that for 40 years and were one of the worst franchises in the NFL until they found Drew Brees. History shows you're not likely to find that guy in free agency because if you have an elite quarterback, you don't let him get away. Ask yourself why the Raiders were willing to let Derek Carr, a man they made their franchise for 9 years, walk. The franchise that knew him best said, we don't think we can win with him. And I know what you're going to say. You're going to say, well, what about Drew Brees? Okay. And Drew Brees was 26 years old and was coming off a devastating shoulder injury. It's a very different scenario than 32, going into your 10th year, having been at this place for 9 years, never won a playoff game. Like it's just a very different reality. There was a guy on Twitter a bit ago who messaged me and said, I want to read you his tweet directly, but if I can find it. But here it was. It was Greg who said, the media also said Eli Manning wasn't a Super Bowl caliber quarterback. Just sit down, bro. You don't know. Eli Manning was the number 1 overall pick and won a Super Bowl in his 4th year. That's a terrible comparison. Derek Carr, there's a much larger sample. He's been in the league for 9 years. He's going into year 10. Again, I think Derek Carr's a good quarterback. He's going to win games. He's going to throw for a lot of yards. He's going to do some really good things. There's just a lower ceiling with Derek Carr. And if you're okay, again, like I'm not trying to convince you of my point of view. I'm not trying to yell and tell you you're wrong. It's just an approach. I would prefer, and I would still love it if the Saints go into this draft and select a quarterback. I would love it if at 29 or at 40, they take a quarterback. Maybe it's Hendon Hooker we've talked about. Maybe it's Jake Haener. I don't know who it might be. But I would love it if the Saints would start taking those shots because you've got Derek Carr for at least 2 years. You are locked in with him for at least 2 years. use these 2 years to see if you can find the guy that's going to be next after him. Because that's the only way you maximize. That's the only way you're going to find your way back into championship contention. Because if you sit around waiting for another Drew Brees to fall in your lap at 26 years old, you might end up waiting another 40 years. Hey, thanks so much for watching. Please leave your comments. I love to interact. And be sure to hit the red subscribe button below.